there's more to be found in theater than just acting for me personally. I think that acting and performing is almost like the finished product, but there's more to making that product. And I wanted to be part of that, making the product from the beginning all the way through the end.
I have a list on my phone of like funny things that people have said that are they belong in a play somewhere.
A lot of the things that I'm good at really do have something to do with an audience. one way or the other, an audience has to be involved.
It's like first I was performing, then I was directing, and then I was the dramaturg, and now I'm the playwright. And so it's like, wow, this is the source, you know?
You get people who create absolute magic, and you, as a director or a playwright, had virtually nothing to do with it.
You can't sleep because theater is what you love, and you just got the part that you've been dreaming of.
Welcome to the theater. When you watch a play, you are seeing the result of hundreds of people and thousands of hours of work. We're here at the Bethany Lutheran College Theater, and we're going to look at the theatrical process from beginning to end. It all starts with the playwright.
To me, the art of playwriting isn't about getting published. It's about making awesome things happen on stage for an audience. One of the most important things a playwright needs to start with is a direction.
The one idea, the one type of character relationship, the one object that seems very important, and then the world kind of expands from this little idea, this little nugget.
I'm a big proponent of play mapping. I'm a big proponent of knowing where you're going to end before you start writing.
Somewhere I've identified what's important, what are some major themes.
I like to map out what are the major plot points in a show. When Emily and I worked on Above Board, man, I think we just spent weeks and weeks just going, what is the story?
This should happen first, this should happen second, then maybe this happens sometime later, and then this is how it's going to end, and then you kind of fill in the gaps. Who are the characters going to be?
I think we had like 10 people in the cast at first, and then we whittled it down to 9, then 8. You know, people, we just said, no, we don't need this person. What about the landlord? No, we don't need a landlord.
What types of people they're going to be.
Can one of them be a magician? Yeah, one of them's a magician. Well, what can they do? What's their weird thing? Well, maybe they regurgitate. Yeah, that'd be funny.
I like to name people pretty early because that seems to help figure out who this type of person is, or maybe it means something, like this name means grieving or something, and that somehow helps me connect to what their story within the story is going to be.
So it helps when I have a person that I can talk my ideas through with. Collaborating with Emily has been really cool. That's been a huge and integral part of this process for me, has been the collaboration. Then I can say, okay, what if it's like this? What if it's like that? Okay, no, that's really stupid. We can both agree that that's really stupid. So we're not gonna do that. And then, you know, we're just bouncing ideas off of each other.
It's just sort of talking things through. I would say most of my playwriting process isn't at the computer or at my notebook, it's pacing. And just walking around the room thinking, and then, okay, yeah, that's good. And then I'll write down that salient point.
And so maybe it's, I craft this little snippet of dialogue and that leads into this purpose and this objective and this scene, but then I'm going to go back and build into the beginning, or I know how it's going to end, so maybe I want the final lines right away, and then I'll kind of go backwards. When I've collaborated with other people, we end up doing something a lot more linear. Scene 1, this happens, so-and-so enters, lights up, it's a lovely house, blah, 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 and then these things happen. Okay, scene 2, what happens next? And I like both ways.
You gotta have a map. You gotta know where you're gonna go. This is maybe why adaptations are sort of fun, because when I'm doing the Seussification of Romeo and Juliet, I didn't write Romeo and Juliet, somebody else did, so at least I have the story. All I gotta do is Seussify it. I gotta make it sound like Dr. Seuss. Same thing with The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. The story is already there. How do I make it interesting for an audience?
Our outline was Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tale. So we read several different versions of that, and then we sat in a room together and we're like, okay, great.
Pinocchio is weird because Pinocchio is nothing like the Disney version.
There are multiple adaptations. It's all relatively the same, but one adaptation might focus a little bit more on this one thing. We do outline that initial story, or we outline other people's tellings of the story.
The play map for the Disney version is like this, but then Pinocchio is a big long book. He's going to all these weird places, and one chapter might be, oh, he sees a snake and the snake is vicious, and then it starts breathing fire. Cut. We don't need it. You get rid of that kind of stuff.
And we say, what do we want from our adaptation? What can go, what can stay? We looked into how other people portrayed it too. We wanted to see what other people are focusing on, what's sort of the colloquial understanding of this piece, because we want to please the audience when they're watching it.
I start with something very rough, and then I go back and refine it because I need words on page, and if there's nothing there, there's nothing to fix. So I always go into stuff thinking, I'm gonna need to fix this later. And maybe I come back and I realize I don't need to fix it, but if I need to fix it, at least there's something to fix.
Economy, condensing, making sure that everything can be done in 2-hour traffic of your stage.
Some of that is within the private writing sessions. So the cool thing when you're writing with somebody else is you've got that built-in, okay, hold on, let's read that back. You read that to me. Just kidding, that was crap, we gotta change that.
What ended up happening really naturally was that we would start with scene 1, finish scene 1, and go on to scene 2. And usually we'd finish like a block of scenes and then say, okay, let's go back, read it, and kind of clean it up.
Maren and Emily have been writing, and then they've been inviting a couple people to just sort of sit in. What do you think of this?
Well, we wrote Act 1, and now I think we just need somebody else to read it with us that isn't us, that hasn't lived it for the last several months, that isn't proud of all these funny jokes or this precious little line.
I personally thrive on constructive criticism. I need someone to tell me that that was the bad choice. I need someone to tell me that that was the wrong choice, because then they could probably tell me what they think a good choice might be.
We got quite a bit of feedback from people of, oh, I think this character should be seen more, this character maybe seems underdeveloped.
Then they add a few more people. Now there's a charcuterie party, and we're eating cheese. And then there's the final read-through. We've got people here in the seats who can listen to us read through it.
I hope people think it's beautiful, because we think it's beautiful.
What feels really cool about this project specifically is that it's ours, not just Maren's and mine, but it's also Bethany as our department, as our people involved, as staff and faculty, designers and students and et cetera, that we're tailoring it literally to fit the type of theater that we love making. We're creating it literally for us.
I think that when you're writing a play with a friend or with a partner, it might go a little quicker because your opinion isn't your own. Your opinion is yours and somebody else's, and sometimes you can come to a consensus quicker.
I guess that's the cool thing about collaboration is it's still 100% of me and 100% of a writing partner all working together, and it's just 200% of an awesome play.
I know that when Emily and I worked together, it was so easy to bounce ideas off of. Same thing when I work with Hans. And it becomes a lot less drudgery when you've got a friend, because we always laugh better together.
Being in the same room, bouncing ideas off each other, laughing hysterically at something that now no one else has laughed at since. But I mean, that's one of those things too, where it's like, we've had so much fun writing this, so we want people to have as much fun watching it or hearing it as we have.
When we did write Sleepy Hollow, we completed it over a summer, so it was about 4-ish months of us actually sitting down and writing.
So far, in any of the plays that I've written or co-written, it's been about, I guess, 6 months.
Jam Jar Sonnets, for me to get to the story down, I think that probably took about 8 weeks.
You hear it mentioned to you, you let it just sort of tumble around in your brain a little bit. Finally, once you maybe have an idea of where to start, you start getting a little bit more excited. You invest a little bit more of your brain power into it. So it is a little bit of a nudge. It's like, oh, that could be fun. That maybe we should do that. And then it becomes more and more like, oh yeah, we're doing this. This is gonna happen. And then finally, you'll see it on stage.
Writing for the stage is so interesting in that there's a chance you will get to see that different interpretation. I'm writing it, I'm a playwright, but I'm not gonna be the one directing it. There's an element of trust there where I'm like, I'm gonna see the process, but I'm not gonna have the creative control afterwards. I'm gonna see exactly how other actors, other designers, another director is going to interpret my work.
And if you're a playwright, you're the one who just had a little kernel of an idea at the beginning of this whole process, where now you've involved, 100 people into this cool idea. And if other people do this play beyond you, if it gets published and it goes on to other venues who are doing this, now you're talking about thousands of people who have been involved in something that just was a few firings of some neurons that you had in your brain. And it's super exciting to be a part of that. That's a fun artistic process to follow, and it's really fun to see how that grows and grows and grows.
Choosing a play to perform can be a daunting task. Do you choose a classic or something modern? A comedy, a drama? We talked with some directors about the process of picking a play.
I guess plays are sort of an extension of the person putting the play on. And so I'm looking for plays that have something that is of interest to me.
When I'm thinking of what kind of plays I might want to do in the future, I think as a creative person, most people have kind of a short list. So stories that have intrigued me since being a kid, or stories that I encountered in school or in grad school, or just life in general.
I think for me, it's all about what conjures images, what kind of like stokes the imagination. I'll go through them, and some of them you kind of learn that you can abandon pretty quickly if you're reading it and it's just nothing sticking, but it's the ones that you kind of forget that you're reading words and more you're seeing pictures, and opportunities for cool stage moments and stuff are the ones that I think are worth hanging on to, and has worked pretty consistently for me in the past.
Just being in our area of academia, we'll do things that, you know, it's maybe from classical literature. So I mean, a commercial theater is maybe not going to be doing Antigone, you know, or like some kind of Greek tragedy, because like who's going to go buy tickets to that? But here, it's part of curriculum. And so kids, I mean, they can get graded on being in a show because they're doing all this prep work, they're putting in their time, they're analyzing characters, they're writing papers, they're keeping journals, they're doing a lot of academic work.
You're looking for the cast. You're looking for, do you have the talent pool to do this particular show? You gotta like the show. You have to find the show says something to you as a director. You have to pick a show that can't be immoral to you. I was taught that at a state school, and it's true. You have to find shows that somehow are going to arouse the passion within you to want to do something great.
We tend to pick things that in some way will kind of serve a student and serve just the department in general. So it's a lot of times a balance of, okay, well, it's been a few years since we've done maybe a tragedy. It's time to do a funny play. Maybe we've just done something contemporary. So maybe it's time to do like Neil Simon, like 80s or 90s, or even earlier, like the mid-century comedy, that kind of thing. So it's always kind of a balance of what have we done kind of recently.
You want to make something cool. I got into this business because I want to make cool things. I want to tell great stories. And there's just a lot of great stories to tell. And that means that sometimes they aren't even made up yet.
Original adaptations, classical things, mid-century. So we always try to have a good variety and nothing that we've been doing too much. So even thinking like we've been doing some adaptations recently, but then in the spring, like we're doing something that's out there, you know, it's a script that exists.
So it's really about telling a great story and making sure that you've got all the resources to be able to do that.
After a play has been chosen, each member of the design team starts working on their special aspect of the production. In some cases, designers may know about a play months in advance, which gives them plenty of time to dream up ideas. But a more normal theatrical production, designers have about 6 weeks before rehearsals start. Let's start with designing a set. What does it take to design a good set?
I'm looking as a set designer to make fun environments for actors. When I started doing this, I knew that if I could build a good set, if I could design a good set, it would actually help the actors act better.
It's fun to try to create a playground and kind of try to create an opportunity for actors to sort of like enjoy and kind of be connected to the space. Me coming at it as a non-actor myself, I'm not much of an actor, and so like I don't have that sort of innate feeling of how to connect with the space and how to connect with your surroundings as an actor. And so it's fun to try to create an environment that could have a lot of potential for other people who do feel that connection.
I want an actor to get on my set and I want them to have fun. I want them to feel like, oh, this is cool. I want actors to feel like this is a jungle gym playground that helps them to pretend. And so it kind of helps us to revert back to that innate sense that we all had as children where we were on the playground, we were on the jungle gym, but it wasn't a jungle gym, it was a ship or it was a rocket. And so I want to create environments on stage that bring actors back to that feeling, because if an actor is feeling that way, they're really going to sell it for an audience, which then again ultimately is going to help tell that story. And then the other part of that is you want to make something pretty for the audience. I love building models by hand. I don't always do that, and now there are some neat programs that help you to design on the computer. But either way, it's really great to have a 3D rendering that you can kind of walk through. If it's an actual tangible model, you know, it's fun to kind of hold it. And if I'm not directing the show, I can point to a director and say, okay, this is where Hamlet goes over, and now he's talking to Gertrude. Polonius is going to be hiding behind this fabric, and I'm going to have the fabric right there. 3D models mean everything. But you can actually be a really solid designer and not have the greatest drawing skills. There are people who can draw two-dimensional renderings fantastically well. But for me, I'm a better model builder. It really helps me to make a model. And then once you make a model, it's really easy for me to then build it big. For Snow Queen, for example, the show that we're working on right now, much of this was I had a lot of pictures that I was deriving inspiration from. I was trying to figure out how am I going to take all these cool Pinterest photos that Emily sent me and sort of utilize them in interesting and different ways. Sometimes it's an extemporaneous experience. I try not to design that way most of the time, but for things that are organic, like rocks and trees, sometimes you don't know what you're doing until you do them. We've got trees on the stage that I know how to do because I've done them before, and basically we call them sock trees. We've had them in our stock, and they go up quickly, and they're a very solid way to do trees. But in the front, we were trying something completely different, and these were based on some photos that we saw of a Tom Price art installation. We didn't know how to do those from the pictures that we were given, but we decided, well, you know what, we can go to our local home store and we can try it with drainage tile. And so we dropped drainage tile tubes down from the catwalks, and then we tied them in knots. That's how we did it. Now that when we're tying those tubes into things that look like trees, you still make little models of them. They're just not finished. So, you know, I took little PEX tubing and I did it in microcosm. I did it in 1/2-inch scale, and I built it on a ladder that we just happened to have in the prop room. But it worked. We picked our favorites, and then we tried tying the trees in knots based on the models that we had suspended between the rails of this ladder. Sometimes that's how it goes. Sometimes you're basically working with cursory ideas, and you've got your ideas. They're not fully fleshed out yet, but you know that something will work. You know that you can at least commit. For the Snow Queen set, it was really interesting because I needed the Snow Queen to be able to walk down steps, and she's going to be wearing heels. And so I couldn't just make it like rocky, tumbly hillside. I knew that she had to actually walk down steps, but I still wanted the set to look organic. So I started making these organic shapes that kind of ended up looking like half circles and paisley shapes. Then we give this to our technical director. I knew this was going to be a challenge to try to draft how you're going to make these things. And this is how we are living in the future, because what he did is he took the SketchUp file and had a printer print them to scale on a large format printer. So we had these big, giant patterns that we put on pieces of plywood, and it worked. That's another thing that I guess I love about theater and the creative process, is that nobody's really an island in creativity, and everybody is helping each other. So I've got my creative ideas. I pass those creative ideas off to another very creative person. That creative person has a team of other creative people that are working with them. You know, you just gotta make sure you're all talking, you're all communicating, and great things happen when many minds come together for a single purpose.
Meanwhile, the costume designer is busy crafting clothing concepts for the production. They may not start sewing the costumes until the actors are chosen, but there's a lot of prep work to get ready for that point. What's it like in the costume shop?
My process always starts with research, talking with the director and some sort of dialogue of like, why are we telling this story, and why, what do you want it to say, and where do you want it set, and what's just kind of the general aesthetic or vibe.
My design process always starts with period research. What historical period is the play or production set in? What time was the story written in? What influences that all has? Having the historical context for what people are supposed to look like and what the story is trying to tell.
Is it, it's the 1940s, and like, what does that look like? Is it the true 1940s, or is it like a goofy, shticky kind of musical comedy kind of 1940s? And then it goes back to the script too, and then it's finding the specifics of, okay, well, somebody exits, this is the next day, they should have a new outfit, or they should do this, or, oh, they leave on a train, so they need a jacket, or the mechanics, I suppose. All of those kind of get ironed out a little early, and then kind of from there it starts to be, okay, well, why would this character be wearing this, and is it purple, and should it be purple, and is it exaggerated, or is it really simple?
Because if clothes are going to represent the character, you want to have a good understanding of character first. Then you move on to making a drawing of what you want, just so you have a slightly more visual representation. And then after making a picture, going fabric shopping or pulling from stock that you might already have, then finding a pattern that also works, cutting that all out, drafting it up, and then it's all tailoring and finishing touches from there. The bulk of the work is actually, cutting and sewing, but it's probably the least brain-heavy part of the process. It goes all the way from designing to putting on buttons. That's kind of the hierarchy in costume spaces. The starting process, which is designing, coming up with the ideas for the time period, using that kind of as your basis, and then moving on towards the specific cuts that you want for certain characters, patterns, colors, that kind of thing. So that would be a designer.
Design elements that I love the most, just in general, are color and texture. So for me, I love a tight color palette usually, and it limits me in a good way, in a productive way. A couple years ago, I did Hello Dolly, and I knew the chorus was going to be in sepia tones. Then it helped me when I'm fabric shopping, instead of the world is my possibility, it's, okay, I'm looking for lovely browns and tans and creams and ivory, and as opposed to oh, well, that's a beautiful purple. It's no, don't look at purple. You're looking for browns or tans. And I also love color linking people too. So if it's, oh, well, the chorus all has a bit of that orange, or the royalty's got purple, but so does maybe this one character because their allegiance is a little to them. It's kind of Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. It's well, the girl in the red dress is going to get together with the guy in the red shirt. I like that kind of thing.
Then it moves on to people like drapers and cutters, people who actually cut out the fabric, and people who make the drafts, which are the patterns that you use to make clothes. Making costumes, you either have a self-drafted pattern, which is you take a piece of muslin on a dress form, making sure it's all straight up and down, using that, then drafting out the kind of shape that you want for the top of the garment, as well as how it flows down. And then for pattern pieces, it's really just following the pattern, pinning the fabric to the pattern that you have set out and cutting and following along those lines. And then moving on to people who actually put those cutout pieces together, put on the finishing touches, trims.
Oh my goodness, so this is the first show I've ever done where the costume has been made for me. And that has been so cool. Because for theater physics last year, theater physics, the nature of it is very much okay, we'll find you something. We've got tons of costumes already. But for this show, again, working with Emily and Mara, when they have such a vision for the project, she had this picture of what the summer princess dress would look like. And so then she went and she found fabric that was designed for the summer princess, and she built a dress because it was for the summer princess. And so to have that be me then has been amazing. I tell people putting on that dress is 6-year-old me freaking out, because it's just, it's amazing. I feel like Barbie Rapunzel.
And then kind of on the after side of that, after those clothes are all finished, something that I did a lot when I was a student here was I was the wardrobe supervisor, which basically means during productions, I am in charge of making sure people are dressed correctly, making sure clothes are not torn or destroyed, and if they are, to make sure that they're not torn or destroyed when people have to go on stage in those clothes. And then after production is finished, cleaning, maintaining, making any smaller repairs that weren't super necessary during show, after show, just so everything is maintained and ready to go for the next performance. I really enjoyed being a wardrobe person. I get to be a part of the hustle and bustle of live performances. Sleepy Hollow, I was in charge of doing all the quick changes. I helped people get out of the gunpowder prop costume, and I really enjoyed being the ghost hand in a live performance. I really liked being a part of the magic of making someone completely transform from one scene to another.
You have two kinds of costume changes, I'd say. The kind where you can take as much time as you want, and then the quick change. The quick changes are more fun. Your time to change is 2 lines. So you're running into the wings, just disrobing whatever you can, kind of hopping onto pants, and as you're going onto stage, you're kind of hopping on one foot into your pants and arriving on stage. Here I am, it's me, different character now. Those are the really fun ones. I enjoy quick changes. It's more of a science than art when you get to quick changing. This needs to happen, then this, and this, and this, in this particular order, in this amount of time. You know, when you have lots of time to change, it's just a normal change of clothes. Make sure that everything is where it needs to be. You know, collars are down and flies are up.
Most plays have an audio component as well. They may have an original score, they may have sound effects. We asked a composer about his process for creating music for a theatrical production.
I usually start with, as best I can, kind of an unattached read of the script, just to kind of take in the story. And then I usually choose a moment that is most meaningful for me. A lot of times that's not actually like a key plot point in the story itself, but it's just something that I think is cool or could be a cool musical moment. Because once you build your vocabulary, once you choose what tools you're going to use, put them in your toolbox, then that gives you somewhere to go. Because if you're just starting with a purely blank page, that can be really intimidating and actually kind of unfocused, if you will, if you have everything at your disposal. So I try to pick that favorite moment, something that you really enjoy and can respond to, and create a base set of rules to play with for the rest of it, and that makes the rest of the score much easier. So I'll usually create that one cue, whatever it is, and then I'll start at the beginning and just work my way through chronologically. And then of course in theater, it's sort of like a bricks and mortar kind of thing where there's like bricks of music, musical statements, musical phrases, but then there has to be this mortar, this glue that pieces them all together so that we're always following the action and just kind of thinking about how those things are going to interact with each other and how this cue is going to hand off to this cue to try to make it as cohesive and smooth as possible. One thing I love about theater is its volatility, and sometimes it's used as a criticism that you go and see theater once and then it can't be replicated. It sort of like only lives in this moment and then it's gone forever. With sound design and with music, in theater, I think that's kind of a fun part of the challenge, is that it needs to be adaptive in a way to follow the pace of the action, to support, you know, the normal design things like support the emotional content, the arc of the story, all that stuff, but also all the fun things that you can plan in the background to be adaptive and to be breathing and present in the space, which is hard to do with recorded sound. So yeah, I think that's the excitement of it, is how do you keep your audience in the moment? How do you give the actors and the other designers and stuff some fun stuff to respond to while trying to enrich the experience in the story the best way that you can. Music can have a life after the show closes. Of course, with a play, we have video recordings and photos and memories and all of those things, but it's not the same sort of life as music can have after a show. Maybe your music can be used in a future production. With some music that I've written in the past and what I'm gonna do for Snow Queen as well, like I'm gonna make a soundtrack version of it and put that out there, see what happens, you know, just like you love for people to listen to what you create, and it's that simple. So it's a little bit different from that design perspective. Sound design and music design is unique because it is so much more, I think, of a universal language than other design disciplines. Everybody's got an opinion about music. Everybody has a taste in music. I would say most people don't have a taste in lighting palettes, but everybody does for music. And so I think the universality of that is an interesting thing to play with. And another thing I enjoy talking to the students about is, when do you play to expectations and when do you play against expectations? And for the most part, you don't want to play against so often that your music choices just seem jarring or esoteric. One song that you heard when you got dumped back in high school or whatever is going to mean something totally different for somebody else who got dumped in high school. And so like, you don't want to make that choice and put that into a play as the breakup song because it only means something to you. And so really kind of balancing what could potentially mean something for either everybody or most of the people, while still bringing your own voice and your own taste to it is as your charge as a designer. And so it's an interesting balance to try to find that individuality versus universality. And I think it really is exclusive to music and sound. And sound too, you know, is such a omnipresent environment. Like everywhere that you are, you know, you're surrounded by sound, you're surrounded by naturalistic sound, and playing against that on stage is really fun because you can decide what you want to be naturalistic and what you want enhanced.
When lighting is done well, the audience might not even notice. But a poorly lit production can take the audience out of the immersion. How do you go about lighting a stage well?
When I'm asked to do lighting design for a show, I start by getting a lot of the upfront information, the timeline for production, where they're at with the show's rehearsals. What is the space like? What are the limitations or capabilities of the space? I've worked in places where they didn't have lighting boards that could program. It was all manual, right? So then you have to work with a technician or someone who's going to do it for the shows.
The process really starts when you get your first copy of the script. You want to read through it several times. The first time you want to just get a feel for the idea of what the show is about.
Especially if you're not already familiar with the show. Reading through it, meeting with the director is usually big, or the design production team overall to see their concept, their design ideas, what they're actually doing on stage, and how they're bringing the script to life, so you know their priorities too. They often say, this is the 3 or 5 or 10 main things I need to accomplish with light. If you can make those happen, then the rest can just be practical or face light. That'll work, you know. And sometimes it's the complete opposite where they say, I just need this and this, and the rest is your creative freedom. Those are great people when they just let you run with it. But usually it's somewhere in the middle.
So right now we're really in the creative planning part of the process as far as the lighting design goes. That includes planning which angles the lights are coming from, which parts we want lit up at which points. And then after that goes into the part where we are hanging the different fixtures and deciding, oh, we want this light fixture in this spot to be able to hit this angle for this scene. So after we've hung and focused everything in a way that makes it easier to work with, then we get to do the fun part of actually creating the cues themselves. Going through the script systematically and creating specific instances where the lights change from moment to moment within the script. This could be simple lights up, lights down kind of cues, or it could be mood shifts depending on what's happening in the scene. I especially find this stage super fun because you get to get really creative and really use the light to sculpt the actors and create the specific look that you want to best communicate the emotions of that moment in the script.
I like to think of lighting design as painting the stage. And I think when I say it, people suddenly have this moment of, oh, okay, that makes sense. It's like it can be like a blank canvas if you look at it, right? And you're painting it.
From my experience, it really is a balance of managing the technical side, because what is lighting other than a technical field? There's control software and there's 80 different lights in the air that are doing different things. How do you best use the technology that you have available and the setup that you have available to creatively express what you're trying to create?
In order to get the specific looks that we want for the show, we have several different kinds of lights that we can use. We have the traditional incandescent lights, and then we also have the newer LED lights. Those are really fun because they can change color. And then we also have a couple different moving lights, and those are especially handy because you can move the unit itself to hit different spots on the stage, change the texture on the go, and all of that super fun stuff. For the conventional lights, we have several different methods that we use to change up the look of the light on the stage. To change the color, we have different kinds of plastic gels. The gels are essentially a thin piece of plastic that's tinted a different color, and then we can put that in front of the bulb to change the light that's coming out. For the gobos, we have a bunch of different kinds as well. They can be super generic, like just generic breakups, so it's different size splotches all over the stage, or it can be like a specific image as it's dictated in the plot, or it can be something in between, like cutouts of leaf patterns or stars. So within the project, the lighting designer has a lot of different sets of lights or systems to work with. One, for example, is the cyc, which is essentially a big white sheet across the back of the stage. You can light it from the top or from the bottom. We have some different LED lights hitting it, so that way you get to play with the different colors and see how they interact on the white backdrop. You also have the front light, which lights up the faces of the actors. You usually want a couple different angles of face light, as well as possibly some light from the side to help make sure the actors are well defined, some light from the back to make them pop from the background, as well as some light from the top.
The other thing too, and it's much like sound and it's much like a lot of other systems, is that lighting is very much a team sport. No one system of light, no set of lights is good enough on its own. It needs the support of the entire system, of the entire rig, and so kind of taking that global look at it and okay, so how does like my top light can reinforce what I'm doing for face light, what I'm trying to do with special effects and all that stuff, and using everything together as a same team to sort of unify it.
Because of where our particular show takes place, there's some parts in the script that talk about the northern lights. So I've done some different experimenting with like effects projectors and some of the moving lights and try to see how we could make some fun northern lights effects.
It's really magical to see the light on everyone's faces, or their faces light up literally, when you start adding lights to production and suddenly they just kind of like come into their own. They're like, oh, it's actually a show now. Someone said that this week to me. They're like, oh, the lights, they actually make it feel like a production.
It's a pretty cool feeling. It's way different than when you're practicing under work lights. When you're practicing under kind of dynamic lighting and it's purposeful lighting, there's a feeling of coming alive as a character. For me, it's a big mental thing. Of course, it's cool to be under the cool lighting and look cool, but for me, it's the lighting that sets apart kind of just an everyday practice to like an actual, this is the moment. It's also kind of a professional shift. When those lights are on, it's just a more professional attitude. You're there to get your things done, to be an actor, to be timely, to be your character. It's very different under the lights.
You may be surprised that we haven't talked about actors yet. That's because they haven't been chosen. It's now time for auditions.
So when plays are announced, usually actors go look it up. They look at the characters, they look at what parts are available for them. I would look up what parts fit my acting range or my vocal range. With Snow Queen, we didn't know anything. And so we had to wait for the read-through last year to get to know the parts. And then after hearing all of those parts, different actors got to start dreaming of the parts that they wanted and what they could start working towards.
I pick up an audition slip, usually says on there what the readings are. If it's a musical or something, then there would be sections of music that you would have to pick out to learn and be able to sing at the audition.
The first thing I do usually when I hear about production is I kind of research the actual play to see how much interest I am in it, which parts I would try to look out for. And then I'd probably talk to the director a little bit and get kind of what their thoughts are on the play and what they're looking for. And then when the audition cuttings come out, I try to read around the play in context of the cutting so I understand kind of what the directors are looking for in a cutting, auditioning, and then I'd probably run through it a couple times with different phrasings and different lines. Usually I record myself and listen back and think, well, that's good, that's not good, kind of piece it all together into what I think is a good audition piece. And then I bring it forward and perform it.
You have to be prepared, obviously. You should be memorized, all these different things that a lot of people could guess, but also there's a certain level of confidence that you need in an audition. It's to convince the directors, it's to convince the other people that you are worthy of this part. And even if you don't necessarily have all the skill sets, you could be taught them because you want that role or because you are confident about that role.
You can tell how much people are prepared. I want to make sure that this is clear, that it's distinctly different from being nervous. There's a lot of times I'll see an actor on stage and they're holding a page and the page is shaking like a leaf. That doesn't bother me. Everybody gets nervous, but that's different from preparedness. An actor who is prepared is somebody who you can just tell has put in the time. They've given some thought to what they're auditioning with. And if they're just winging it, a lot of actors feel like, I've just got the chops right out of the gate, I can pull this off. I've made it through this far in my life, just sort of winging it on a wing and a prayer. I can do it with this audition. I can see those people from a mile away. It really makes a difference for an actor to prepare for an audition.
There's two different kinds of auditions. There's closed auditions and there's open auditions. And there's very different feelings for each. Usually the open auditions are a little more pressure. just because you're with your peers, and if you mess up, then everyone's going to hear you.
It kind of makes it more of a realistic setting because, at an actual show, you're going to be performing in front of an audience. So it's generally, I think a better way of doing it.
For closed auditions, it's usually just the directors and the designers in the theater with you. So it's a little bit less pressure when you don't have kind of your peer group. There's a little less pressure to perform. It's more about speaking directly to the directors with your cutting more than you are trying to run an audience.
The day of the audition, drink a ton of water, because if your voice cracks on the stage, if you're dehydrated, if you start shaking, all not good things. I've definitely done them before, so not good things. You walk up there, you take a breath in, you just take a breath, and then start. Just always take maybe 2 to 3 seconds. Also, it's always good to scan the audience before you start. So then in the actual audition, when you're speaking, it becomes muscle memory. So that's why you want to practice, because you're going to be nervous and you're going to want to talk faster when you're going to want to talk slower.
I try to memorize auditions. It matters if I'm in another play. I try not to memorize 2 plays at once, because I found that leads to a lot of problems when you're trying to memorize 2 plays. You kind of mix things up. There's gaps where you start going into another character kind of mid your performance. So usually if it's the first play of the year, I'll be memorized. I think it's more useful to memorize because first of all, it shows your commitment. It shows that you can memorize. And it also allows you to put more emotion into your character when you're not kind of holding a sheet of paper and your hands are kind of glued to the paper, or you do the awkward one hand is doing the motions and the other hand's kind of holding the paper. So I think it's better to memorize when you can, but also you don't want to conflict with a play that you're already doing, that you're already committed to.
But then you have callbacks, and that's usually the chance to kind of see just a little bit more of a person. So they do their first little tidbit the first night, and then the second night we call you back, and then it's more interactive. You do some dialogue with somebody. You do a lot of kind of almost like screen tests. They're like chemistry readings to be like, okay, well, these 2 people, maybe they just work really naturally together, and that's the type of chemistry you want.
I actually really enjoy callbacks because then they give you specific, cuttings from whatever the script is. That was one of my favorite nights, was just going to callbacks because you got to read different parts of the script. You would go to the back room and go practice with somebody.
I have never experienced anything like Bethany's callbacks before. Pete Bladel, in my very first callback for Sleepy Hollow, asked us to act like horses. And we had to all run around the stage. There was 20 of us running around the stage like horses. And I was like, what is happening? And then he said, okay, now can some of you guys get on each other's backs and we'll see how that works? I was like, what? Excuse me?
In a callback, that's where you see chemistry. Because we have people coming in, they do their prepared pieces or the cuttings that we give them on the first night. Callbacks are for when we want to see how do you relate to another actor. And that's where chemistry really pops up. Chemistry doesn't pop up the first night. If you're just standing on stage with your piece of paper and just doing your lines, or if you're just doing your prepared piece and you're by yourself, that can show us that you've got the chops to do this, but it doesn't show us who you're clicking with.
I think the casting process is one of the most exciting parts of putting together a show, because sometimes you see several different casts. You see how the show could be 4 different shows just based on who's auditioning. It's if we were to cast this person, then we'd cast this person in this role, but we wouldn't cast this person because then that wouldn't fit. But if we cast this person, then we'd probably cast that person, but in a different role than what we'd originally. And so it's just kind of cool it's like a puzzle to figure out. It's a puzzle with several different answers, which doesn't exist, but it definitely is fun to figure out which version of the show we're gonna go with, because usually you have so many talented actors and so many talented people that you could cast the show 40 different ways, and each way is a different show.
The biggest challenge is kind of balancing what you have in your head before you go into auditions and what you end up with, essentially. And so it's sort of sticking to the principles that you think can be or should be part of a character, or part of a scene or a collective of characters, versus the moments that can surprise you and the assets and traits that actors bring into the audition process that can kind of be, oh wow, or interesting moments that can kind of take you in a different direction or take your whole play into a different direction. And so it really is a tricky balance between the two of how you're going to allow yourself to be surprised versus having a consistent vision as a director.
It really boils down to chemistry. If you can find people who work well together, sometimes you just know. And I remember I've even asked people to audition because I felt like there was going to be good chemistry. I have cast people who weren't the strongest singers for a musical, but man, this person and this person worked great together. You're looking for people who can help tell that story. You're looking for people who are going to be able to kind of, there's just signals, they're clicking together. Chemistry is probably the coolest thing about casting.
The cast list. Okay. Lots of emotions. There are so many emotions. So many. Because some people are devastated. And some people are screaming because they're so happy. And it's just like this of all the emotions in the whole world. And they're all theater kids. So they're all like a lot, you know? It's just a lot.
It's always kind of a make or break moment, you know? First, you know, you're looking for your name. Did I get the role that I kind of wanted? Did I get in, first of all, you know? And then you're kind of seeing who else am I acting with?
I'm usually pretty excited and I take a picture of the cast list and then I go look at it by myself because I don't really want people to see how I'm reacting to the people that got chosen for the different roles. But I do enjoy going through the list.
It was a small college, so you kind of know everyone's different talents, trying to think of what I can do with the people that I'm with and what they can bring and then what I can bring to a role. And trying to make these partnerships kind of more than us individually.
For me personally, if I really, really, really wanted a role and I didn't get it, I would be obviously, you'd be pretty sad. But it is very good as you get older. You have a emotional intelligence when you're like, it's okay. My life does not depend on this part. That is one of the most important things.
Getting the role that you want isn't always the most important thing. Being part of a production is a teamwork. It's a team effort. You know that everyone serves their purpose and that you need every piece of the puzzle to make, you know, or maybe every cog in the machine to put on a good performance for an audience.
I very rarely get the part that I want. I'm a very bit actor, so I usually get kind of bit roles, which I enjoy, so I don't usually get to have a role with lots of meat to it to kind of bite into. Even if I don't get the part I want, I always try to put as much effort and energy into the part, even as if it was the part that I wanted. Make the performance as good as possible, because really it's about the whole performance, not about you.
You get the part that you wanted. You don't sleep that night. There's no sleeping. No, never, ever. And it's because you're dreaming of all that you can do with this part and all that you're going to be doing and all the movements you're going to be doing on stage. I remember for Bianca in Kiss Me Kate, I got it and I literally didn't believe it. I was like, huh, and I walked away, nothing. I was like, that's not possible. I laughed and I walked away. And then my friends were like, no, you got it. And I was like, wait. I was like, what? Honestly, it's one of my favorite things of watching other people get the parts that they so wanted. Because there's nothing like it. There's nothing like it.
Once the cast has been selected, it's time to start rehearsals. In many cases, the cast may only have 4 to 6 weeks to learn the show before it opens. The first night of rehearsal is often referred to as the first read-through.
The first night of read-throughs. We're reading through the play. You got your whole cast assembled. We're all meeting, discussing when are your conflicts, introducing the different people. This is the stage manager, this is this assistant stage manager. And then you go through the cast. Everybody goes and talks about what their roles are, and then you read through the show.
The first read-through is always exciting. There's so much energy.
They're long. They're always so long. I love them, but I'm like, whew.
So the first part is usually the director talking about what's kind of the overall story, why are we telling this story, etc. And then oftentimes you introduce the design team and they do some form of design presentation. So it could be, Pete will come in and talk about the set and he'll have maybe a model and it's, little people on the little half-inch model. And it's like, this is what it's gonna look like. Or it's a digital rendering and it's in SketchUp. Oftentimes I'll be there, I've got costume sketches or a research board or something depending on the needs of the show. Just to kind of give them a taste of like, here we are, we're all creating the world.
Most people haven't read the script yet, so it's kind of their first time. You're trying out new things. A lot of times, almost too high energy. It's hard to get things done for the first read-through because everyone's kind of a little hyper. It doesn't help that usually there's candy or some sort of sugary treat that kind of gets everyone all hyped up.
Everyone's laughing at everything because we've never heard this. We think it's so funny. And by the time we perform it, we're gonna be like, second read through, third read through. We've gotten there already with Snow Queen. It's been very fun because I don't know a lot of the freshmen.
I remember my first semester, the first read through, it was just a bunch of people. They all knew each other. They were all like the loudest people I had ever met. And I was kind of annoyed at them. And then I noticed that this read through for this, my 5th show, I was that person that I would have been frustrated by.
There's a lot of us, so like scanning the whole table. And I'm like, okay, there's like at least 6 people that I have never acted with. That's exciting. That's really exciting. Like just the fact that they have skills that I don't have.
It's a very interesting time, the first couple weeks. There is a phase of getting to know kind of everyone and kind of knowing people's boundaries in acting, because a lot of people have different boundaries in acting about the humor or the touching, the things that you do on stage that you don't do in real life.
I love rehearsals, especially at first. Everyone has so much energy, which is really great, but then it gets to a point when you got to figure out a way how to bring that energy down and tell people to focus that energy towards making the show.
After the first read through, we started with a lot of table talk is what they called it. And that was going through the script again, picking out the nitty-gritty stuff, like explaining what this means, or the director's and playwright's idea and writing process and what their vision for it all is, and to answer any questions that the cast would have about it.
So this is when we're dealing with the accents. It's a Christmas Carol. Okay, well you got 2 different English accents going on. You got your standard British accent and you got your Cockney accents. That's what happens during the first couple weeks.
And there's also a brainstorming stage, especially when we do world premieres. We have new scripts that have never been blocked before. There's a lot more input from actors than there usually would be in a normal production. The director usually comes in with, this is the kind of choreography that I'm looking for. But something like, Sleepy Hollow or Snow Queen, there's a lot more, well, what do we do for the blocking? What are people's input and ideas? Which is my favorite thing, because being able to be creative as an actor, not just with your lines, but also with your blocking and the entire feel of the play, is a very cool experience. You kind of feel more like you're involved in the design process than you are just in the acting process.
I think that has been probably the coolest experience. There might be some things that I do differently that they're like, oh, we never thought about it that way when we were writing the show.
Marin and Emily are definitely lean more towards the actor freedom side, whereas a lot of the directors I've previously worked with have been a bit more rigid. Here is your blocking, do this. Here's the intonation for this line.
And then you go into your rehearsals of blocking. Blocking is stage movement. This person moves here. This person here comes and talks to that person. Blocking is where you're moving on stage and why.
It's very different from doing table read-throughs, because now you're not sitting around a table, you're all on stage and trying to actually start acting physically.
We've got rough blocking, which is generally you guys are a glom of people, you're gonna come over here. And by the way, at this point the actors are all still on book, they're still holding their scripts.
Snow Queen is 3 weeks out, and actually just last night we blocked the whole show. Everything that will have been seen on stage we've run through it at least once. So theoretically, they know what they're doing. The directors usually tell the actors where to go. I do my best to keep track of what they're saying and what they're telling the actors. So if anybody later has a question, like where did I go at this point? Or if the directors don't remember, then I have it written down and can remind them. Eventually we're going to start adding in scene transitions, so things that are moving out and people who aren't in the scene will be taking off furniture, and you'll have this prop, or here is your prop, and this is what you do.
And then you come into fine-tuning or non-rough blocking. This is where actors might still be on script, but now the blocking is refined. Shortly after that, actors are off book. Now the acting really happens. Once actors are off book, I think that's when they bring magic, because now they're not worried about holding this thing. Now they can actually look into the eyes of the other actor. That changes everything.
Now you're thinking through things and you're actually making the choice to go somewhere, and it's starting to feel a little bit more real. I think that energy shift in a production usually happens when everybody is off book and knows all their lines, so they can actually get into their character instead of just reading their character.
I really enjoy working with actors who are so boisterous in the first month, and they bring ideas, and they are really annoying. They help devise it, and they bring the comedy. I really respect when those same people are able to then pull it together and be professional when the time calls for it. I think that's maybe one of the most important traits that I've seen, at least in a collegiate level production.
We're definitely getting to the point in the process now where the energy is becoming more focused, and people are like, okay, this is becoming real. This is a thing that's happening and we got to take this seriously. So that's cool to see, because of course we love to see people having fun, but then it's also really exciting and encouraging when they say, okay, no, it's time to focus in. We got to make this the best show that it can possibly be.
Standard rehearsal. You roll up at call time. You usually have like a little powwow or something beforehand where the director's like, okay, we're gonna do this, this, and this. And then we're gonna work on this. And everybody kind of breaks. And then you just go and run it. And they'll be like, all right, here, change this, keep this, that was good. Let's try this. And it's just a lot of like changing and modifying and kind of making sure things are just that like perfect catch.
There are going to be times when you're working some scenes and not everybody needs to be called. So tonight we're calling Romeo and Juliet. We're doing the balcony scene. That's going to take all night. Nobody else is called that night. And then the next night, everybody's called. It's a big ensemble day. We're working the dance. Everybody has to be in the dance.
Rehearsals really vary, I would say, depending on the show that I've been in. So this one has been a lot more scene by scene because the characters that Gerda is meeting are oftentimes there for a couple scenes on her journey, and then they kind of leave and she moves on to the next character. It's been a lot more sporadic for rehearsals. So I would say I was rehearsing about 2-3 times a week. I have a song to sing in theater physics. I was here pretty much every night for 3-4 weeks.
My job as an actor is kind of just to bring it to life. You know, you can have the greatest set in the world and you can have the best orchestration and you can have the greatest everything in the world, but if your actors aren't up to snuff, it's going to take people out of the immersion.
My job personally as an actor is to make sure that I've gone through the script closely enough and I've learned the nuances in my character so that I can bring enough of my own ideas to the table so that then all the directors have to do is trim back or add what they've already had previously in mind. So that their job is not to build my character from the ground up, but that's my job. And then they kind of shape what I've built.
I like to think of as reading the director's mind, thinking about what the director would want in any given circumstance, because that just saves everyone time.
I think that's something that's very unique about Bethany, is that generally, like, when people are casted, they've been casted for very specific reasons, and they tend to be able to intuitively know exactly where they have to go. So what I do when I'm off stage, I'll be generally at the back here, walking through my blocking, making sure I know my lines, because goodness knows I'll still forget them even if they've been down for weeks. I think the most fun, though, is when you've got cast members from the scenes that you're in who are also backstage at the same time, because either you're practicing things or you're actually just like bonding and building that ensemble like dynamic with those people, so it's not always necessarily work. I think messing around backstage creates beauty on stage because then the actors know each other and there's chemistry. The time where I saw that come out the most was when we were doing Dr. Faustus, and Lee and I did not know each other at the beginning of the semester, but then by the time we were at Tech Week, we had just done so much talking backstage that while we were on stage, it was just so much easier to build that chemistry.
If we're allowed in the house, I'll be in the house doing homework, but if it's like a full dress run or a performance, I'm pretty much always just in the wings. I don't go, unless I'm not in an entire act, I don't go usually off stage. I just sit in the wings and kind of prepare for going back on. I find that keeps you more in tuned with my characters and the play in general, how the flow is going, how the audience is reacting. I think those are very important things to kind of know before going on stage.
Dramaturgy. Not every production has a dramaturg, but it can be very useful. We asked our resident dramaturg what she does and why it's important.
Dramaturg, the way I like to say it, is a main contextualizer for a show. They're the person who provides context for cast, crew, and audience as well. So we did Faustus. That one was written in Elizabethan England, meaning that they use a lot of these and thous and outdated language. So a main role of a dramaturg in a show like that is to make sure the cast knows what they're saying, and then thereby the audience will know what's being said on stage. Because if an actor doesn't know what they're saying, an audience member is absolutely not going to know what they're saying. So yeah, that's an example of something that a dramaturg does. They dive into history, they dive into what makes the show, what made the show, who made the show, the context that created the show, what was going on in history, politically, what wars were happening, what people were wearing, how people acted, how people talked, and they are kind of a keeper of knowledge. They provide that information to a cast, to a crew, and then often will help with stuff during the show, such as talkbacks or lobby displays or something that will engage the audience and further draw them in and help them to understand the show just as much as the actors do. Another main thing that a dramaturg does is that they are an advocate for the playwright. They are not only just a keeper of knowledge, but also a keeper of intent. The person who dives into the context of the playwright, what they were experiencing, and tries their best to understand what the playwright originally intended. So that's why a dramaturg is useful for not just a historical play, but also more modern play, or if you're doing a historical play that you're modernizing, you still want to keep it true to what was intended by the playwright. Context is a huge word with dramaturgy. It's all context, and that can be historical context, emotional context, thematic context, just help provide further information for why the play is happening and why the play is important.
Construction of the set can take place as soon as it has been designed. Here at the Bethany Theater, set construction starts just after rehearsals do. The theater scene shop is also one of the many ways that students can get involved with the production.
I love working in the scene shop. It's a lot of fun. I'm constantly learning new skills and new tasks. They're not very conventional, but they work for theater. There's so many things that just work for theater. You really gotta think outside the box, and I love being pushed on that.
My job as scene shop supervisor is to make sure the set gets finished. I work with the technical director and the director. I'm involved with some of the main building of the set, but then it's kind of my job to make sure everything gets finished and everything looks the way the set designer and the director want it to look. So there's a lot of set dressing, putting stuff together, last minute finishes, painting, things like that.
We build the props, the bigger props. Paint the floor, Pete always designs the floor, what's gonna go on there. We come up with a lot of these little tiny decorations. We pull things from prop storage to dress the set. Basically, when you come to a play, everything that you see there has been touched by many, many hands working on getting it to that point.
We are performing at a college, and there are work study opportunities, and there are class opportunities, and the students actually do most of the work. In my ideal world, I am just prepping things and I am just teaching students how to do things.
Working with student help is a real blessing in a lot of ways because it's, for the most part, pure enthusiasm, especially when you have the student who is genuinely very interested in whatever they're working on, which is most of them.
One of the fun things for me is that students can come in with little to no experience, and we'll gladly take their help, and it's a learning opportunity for us to kind of show them how the different tools work, what the different procedures are for making things.
I came to Bethany not knowing anything about tools or, well, I knew a little bit.
This is a fantastic space to learn. Instead of a job where you have that pressure to get things done, here it's all about teaching and learning.
I love working with students who have never been in the shop before because it's a wonderful, hey, it's your lucky day, you get to learn how to use this tool or you get to learn how to do this.
And then there's always kind of a point too where you're teaching somebody a new skill or a perspective or something like that, and when you start to try to hand it off to them to be on their own about it, you're still there as a support structure, but you're not driving the process anymore. You're letting them drive, but you're still there to be the mechanic and try to help fix something if it breaks. That process, I think, is very exciting for both of us.
Whenever there is just a job to be done, you kind of just get thrown into it, but you learn so much from being thrown into it.
Right now at Bethany, we hire a construction company to come in and build the mainframe and structure. They take about a week to do it. They bring in a crew, they know what they're doing. The structure goes up very, very quickly.
But apart from that, the set crew really does everything else when it comes to dressing the set.
This is where the tedium lies. In this particular set, there was a lot of fabric. I have worn out my fingerprints on this hand from smoothing out painted muslin. It takes an awful long time.
All the fine details to do the painting, to do the trim work, to do all of the set dressing. And to kind of watch that process take place is a ton of fun.
On this set, I helped put some fabric on the trees.
I put together a lot of the PVC pipe little tree foliage things. We did a lot of that. A lot of hours went towards that.
I did the branches on the bridge.
I also helped put flooring down on the bridge that you'll see, and also the birchwood railings going across the bridge.
I really enjoy painting. For Black Eyed Susan, I've painted the cloud backdrop, which was really cool.
I'm buried in paint most of the time. I spatter paint, I spray paint, I'm throwing paint around all the time. I'm not even that great of a painter in my own house because I make such a mess, and I just want to show my pants. This is how I am looking much of the time.
On stage, students are doing a lot of the painting, they're doing a lot of the gluing. For this set, we had to connect a bunch of PVC pipes together. Most of the PVC pipes were connected by students. It was time to raise them up in the air. We have student helpers help raising them up. We had a lot of muslin on this set, which all had to be painted and then cut into strips and then glued to the floor. All of those things done by students.
There's a lot of creative problem solving. I'm still working on getting in that headspace to where I can think outside the box in the ways that I see Pete and Phil thinking. There are so many uses for things beyond what you think they can be used for. There's this thing, what else can we do with it? It has as many purposes as you can think of. With time, I think you'll get used to it and you'll start to get more creative and be able to think like that.
We had to hang drainage tile, and then the drainage tile looks like drainage tile. So how do you make drainage tile look like it isn't drainage tile?
We didn't want to see the corrugation of the drainage tile tubes, so we basically put down layers of spray foam on the trees.
And then on top of the spray foam, we put fabric. And the spray foam basically just gave the texture of bark underneath the muslin. And then on top of the muslin, we painted on like a glue. And then after all the fabric was done, which took forever, we had to paint it brown to look like trees. It's quite the process for the trees.
If I were to do those trees again, I would try to find a way to reduce the steps because the steps are what take time. But in the creative process, you don't know that on the onset. So the creative process is all about discovery. Am I smarter now? Yeah, I am. Will I do these trees again? Definitely. Will I do them differently and try to reduce steps? Yeah, that's the goal. So with each of these sets that you build, you just get smarter for the next one. I love that part.
Those types of problems are things that you are constantly needing to come up with solutions to. When you're building a set, you are taking things and making them look like other things. Trying to find out what those other uses are or what materials you can use to look like other materials or the cost-effective ways to achieve certain effects. These are all different problems that need to be solved, and oftentimes you're just working with what you know, or you're researching, or you're looking up stuff. Every single set is different. Every single production is different, and you're just constantly getting to solve problems and do fun, creative things like that, which I get a kick out of that part of production. The set helps bring the world to life for the audience, but even for the actors a little bit.
When we first came in, it was a couple days after they'd started. We were still doing read-throughs and doing some rough blocking of where we'd want to be when we say this line. And Emily mentioned at the end of practice, oh, you guys, they started the set, you should go check it out. And so we all came through and I was like, wow, that's incredible. But at the same time, that was just the bare bones structure. That was before there was all of the muslin on the set and the painting and the artwork. And so I feel like every time we've come in to run something, there's been something different about it.
There's different stages the set kind of comes in. We covered everything with some camo netting and it looked really cool, but then Pete went and painted it. And so it had this blue kind of glacial tinge to it. It's like, okay, now it's really, really cool. And then we added some muslin over the top to make it look like snow draping over the stairs. And it's like, oh, now this is really cool. And then we added vines and some foliage and stuff. And then it's like, oh, well, this is even better.
Like even today, they added in more roses over there on the tree. And so I feel like I keep noticing new things about it every time I come on stage, which is also really cool. Because then for our audience members who are watching the show, they can notice different things every time they come to see the show too.
The little details just keep making it a little bit better and a little bit better. And it's a very subtle change, but it makes a huge impact. It's those details which really make the stage come alive.
I've learned a lot about just how much work goes into the set. So much work goes in everywhere. It's crazy.
Putting this stuff together takes a much longer time than I thought it did. Like that, as an audience member, I would look at the sets and be like, wow, everything is so put together. They must have had this put together for a while. Like, I bet the actors had like 2 full weeks to just practice on a fully done set. Like that was my understanding. And I get here and I'm like, okay, so we're still putting things together on opening night. All right, cool. I think I just have a better understanding and a better appreciation for the work that gets put into these shows. And I'm super proud of the outcome.
From the beginning, the director has been guiding the overall vision and aesthetic for the play. With the start of rehearsals, their role now expands to working with actors and guiding on-stage movements. The director has a lot of things to think about, but directing can also be a lot of fun.
Directing is my absolute favorite thing. I can talk about scenic design, props design, and I love design. I really do love it. I really got turned on to that though because of directing.
I think the thing I like most about directing is the conversations I have with actors, because it's really encouraging and exciting to hear someone get so involved with their character and wonder so much about their character and have questions about their character that you can help them explore. You're not necessarily answering the questions. I don't think that the director has all the answers. The director doesn't have all the answers, the dramaturg doesn't have all the answers, the playwright doesn't have all the answers. So that's why it's fun to work with actors as they try to find those answers, because sometimes they have to create the answers themselves. As a director, I don't think you're handing the answers to an actor. I think you're helping them explore the ways that they find or create those answers.
Some directors have everything planned out, and I am not that way. And I think with this show specifically, just because I have at least 3 different hats that I have, I'm actually relying a lot on the actors to have ideas or make their own decisions.
And she's obviously got a lot on her plate with this show because she's costumer, playwright, and director. Or she knows what she wants aesthetically. At times she can be wanting something very specific and she'll still tweak a moment. And at other times I think she's a very hands-off, like let the actor build themselves up.
We created the play words-wise, and we had a very specific idea of what things would look like. And now we're seeing that come to life, and that's really awesome to see actors do kind of exactly what you were expecting and also something that you totally weren't expecting. And sometimes being able to guide that or branch that or be like, wow, that's a totally different interpretation or a totally different thing than what I was expecting, but I love it and I want to explore that more.
I've worked with other directors that they have the whole show blocked. Like they have done it months previous and they know exactly, you know, person A is gonna cross here and they're gonna do that. And that just feels really prescriptive to me. And I think an actor likes to be able to know that they've got a little bit more freedom than that.
I love kind of the think tank idea where actors throw their ideas into the center and then we kind of morph those together and we try to come up with stuff together. What if they did this? What if these 2 people fight? You know, what if this person's standing on the shoulders of this person? I really enjoy doing that. Sometimes that's very frustrating, but when you come up with something really cool, that's about as rewarding as it gets.
So I had Benji for my first 2 major Bethany stage productions. And I really enjoyed Benji's style in that he has his vision. He casts in such a way that he knows the actors are able to devise those roles and their own personal abilities and thoughts on the character are what is going to bring it to life. And so then he'll shape it once the actors build it up.
Some of my favorite stuff to do in the world is actor coaching. When you get actors who are dedicated, who have passion and a caliber of excellence, there is nothing more fun than creating scenes that are funny or that move people or that just keep the pace going.
I really prefer small group or individual work. I think that's where I do really well. So there have been moments where Emily will kind of be working with a larger group and blocking a main scene, and then I'll kind of bring a smaller group maybe into the black box and we'll work something more personally or more individually. You remember what you're supposed to be doing physically, what your motions are supposed to be, if you know why your character is thinking that, what they're thinking at the time that's causing them to do that. I have found that really helps me understand a character, and I think it really helps the actors understand their character. We have the whole ensemble on stage, so then it's fun to take your focus away from the main actors for a little bit and kind of look at what everyone else is doing around them and see, okay, is this cohesive? Is this supporting the main goal? Is this distracting from the main goal?
Because it was fun in the beginning and then it was not as fun. And now it's getting more fun, but also more stressful. Thankfully now we've figured it all out and now we're just fine-tuning it and finding times to really solidify these movements and this little scene and this relationship and whatnot. And here on out, it's more difficult, but it's also more fun because some of that figuring out is done, and now it gets to play. Like now we get to like really act and get into it, as opposed to kind of the mechanics of like, where should you come in? How about up there? Or no, that looks weird. We'll fix that later. Like we'll come back to it and fix it or something. So it's starting to feel fun.
Theater is a little magical. When shows are actually happening, there's something really cool about just being on the stage. I am the kind of director, and even I was the kind of actor, I love watching from the wings. I still do. When I direct a show, sometimes I sit out in the audience, but I would say most of the time, I'm watching from the wings. I'm going up into the catwalks. I'm watching the show from above the actors. I just love all facets of it. And there's magic that happens when a show is going on. I remember thinking as an actor, as a student, man, I want to direct. I want to be a part of this for a long time. I got ideas of what would be cool if actors did this. Suddenly now, I'm in the seat where I can have people try that stuff. And that's just all kinds of fun. Performing at a college is different than performing professionally. First of all, you're not dealing with unions. There's a lot of union stipulations in professional theater. I'm burning the midnight oil here at Bethany Lutheran College because I want to. Bethany Lutheran College has a mission statement. It's a Christ-centered department, and so Jesus Christ is at the center of everything that we do here. That's going to be different than some other college even. That's going to be different than the community theater down the road, and that's going to be different than a professional theater company. But every place has their mission statement. But one of the biggest interesting things that's different about doing college theater, at least for me, is that I'm a teacher first. I'm teaching these kids how to do the craft of theater. And that means that I never really go away. You know, I might be done directing the show. I might pass the show off to a stage manager, but I'm still around then. I'm still here to answer questions if there are questions, and I am still around the actors to bolster them up, to cheer them on, kind of become cheerleader at that point. I'm a teacher first. I'm trying to teach this cool craft to students, and so I am present through the whole process.
The stage manager is an integral member of the production team. What does the stage manager do? Let's find out.
My job as stage manager is to basically do all the things that the directors don't do or have time to do. Kind of like be the organization of it all and make sure everything's in place for the show, everything's ready, and then finally when it's showtime, to run the show, run the lights, run the sound, all that good stuff.
So some of the things that stage manager does or that I've done is helping with rehearsal report. So that's just a good communication piece for all the people involved in a production. Just a sheet of paper that has kind of the info, what's needed, what happened. Just having good organizational skills to start. So making sure that your script is ready, it's organized, you have the blocking written in there. So if actors have questions, you can say, yeah, you move here and then.
In the beginning, I basically write down all the blocking for the actors, give their lines if they need help during rehearsals.
And then once it kind of gets into tech, your job gets a little busier. You're learning what your cues are, where they're going to be, how to call those cues, working with lights and sound to make sure that those lights and cues are moving when you want them to. And then it's kind of in tech Greek, it's very much on you, where you can get a stop and go rehearsal where you're learning how to where those cues go, and that's your chance to learn how to do your part of the show. And then once you're in the show, you're up there in the booth and you're going away at it. And it's really fun to be there and calling the cues and just kind of watching the show go, go, go. It's really fun.
I'm up in the booth now and calling all the lights and the sound. So basically calling the cues is having every time when there are new lights or new sound happening in a scene and writing it all down in my script, reading the whole script through as it's happening on stage, and when new lights and sound are supposed to appear, I say lights and sound, go.
So when an actor says ABC, lights go. When an actor says XYZ, sound go. So you have all these different cues in there, and it'll have a number assigned to the cue, and so you're just communicating with your light board and soundboard ops that when I say this number go, you go, and that light turns on or off, that sound goes on. Yeah, it's just a lot of little marks and notes in a book.
Oh, what makes a good stage manager?
You have to be super organized and kind of paying attention the whole time.
Good communication skills, good organizational skills. If you're not organized yourself, it's gonna be hard to keep a show organized. Also have a love of theater. I mean, that's why you're doing it. But just if you're not always like, if you don't always want to be out on the stage in the spotlight, stage manager is a great way to still be involved and still have a very important role in the show, even if it's not, you know, on the lead, but it's still, they're a lead in their own way. That's kind of, yeah, the top 3. If you start with those, you can probably do the rest.
Nearly every play requires props. If minimal props are needed, the prop gathering can be done by a stage manager or an assistant stage manager. But if many props are needed, a production will have a props master, someone in charge of finding and gathering and making the props.
One of the most unsung heroes in any production to me, I think, is the props person. Making props is kind of like building scenery on small scale. You're making things that are going to be handled by actors. You're making things that are going to be sat in by actors, moved around, they get damaged. You usually have to be somebody who can repair those things. What I learned in grad school is a props person has to be somebody who has a car. If you're a props person, you are going everywhere. You're going to antique stores. You're going to the home center. You're running for paint. You're running for casters. It takes an awful lot of organization, but just like scenic design, you're gonna get your hands full of glue. You're gonna get your hands dirty. You're gonna paint things. You have to be somebody who is a maker and really enjoys making things.
For Letters to Anne of Green Gables, I helped with the letters themselves. We had letters written out in the letter envelopes to make them look old. I got to pour the wax on them and stamp them. That was really fun. And we had to make the chalk slate that Anne throws on Gilbert's head. And so Benji he gave me the recipe for sugar glass and was like, here, make this. And so that was a really fun kind of experiment that I'd never done before, was to make this sugar glass and how to make it look like a chalkboard and kind of put tape around the edges that looked like wood, bring it to the actors, and the actors brought on stage and it looked like a chalkboard was getting smashed on his head. And that was a really fun experiment to be involved with, and like, yeah, I made that.
But props people often kind of go unnoticed. And that's sad because props really are so super important. When we did The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, I hired a props guy. Hired August Jeske to make some of the puppets, and so he made the dog for us. He made the Headless Horseman, and then he and I both worked together on the horse that was supporting the Headless Horseman. Together we worked a little bit on gunpowder. He made the pies, he made the fruits, he made a lot of the food things.
To start with props, I've just go through the play, make a list of, okay, this scene, we need this prop and this person needs it. Make a nice little document, and then go see if we have that prop in storage. Hopefully we do. Or find a couple options and ask the director, hey, were you thinking more prop A or prop B for this? Or, okay, wait, that's not the right era, so I have to go back and find a different one. I remember with Anne's suitcases, like finding, okay, which kind of suitcases do we want for Anne, because the era and whatnot. But then hopefully you can pull them all. If not, sometimes you have to make it, sometimes you have to go buy it.
It's just great to have somebody who is designated as a props master, especially if it's a classical show. There's just a lot of stuff that doesn't exist today. You got to make things that look old. You got to make things that you can't just go out to Walmart and buy. Very important thing to have as a props master.
As opening night approaches, all the different parts start to come together. To coordinate the different aspects of a play, the last week of rehearsals are referred to as technical rehearsals. Welcome to Tech Week.
The week before Tech Week always sucks because that's the week where I wonder, is this show good? And that's happened every play I've ever been a part of, whether I'm directing, acting, dramaturging, whatever. It gets repetitive. That's the week when we're seeing everything the same way we've seen it over and over again. And it's hard to remember that it's going to get elevated by the set, by being complete, by the lights, by the sound, the costumes. It's really amazing what a difference it makes, because there is a point where it definitely gets to be like, okay, wait, what are we doing here? What's going on? And then you see it all come together and you're like, oh yeah, this is what we're doing here. This is why we do this. This is beautiful.
Those two big scary words that everyone's like, oh no, Tech Week.
Ooh, Tech Week is very fun. Everyone's always super tired and just stressed out of their minds. and trying to make it the best thing they can, and no one ever knows if it's actually going to go together until the day of.
Tech Week is kind of the final call of any given production. It's where all the elements come together. So music, lighting, actors, everything kind of comes together. And it's a little messy at first, but that's what Tech Week is for. It's to iron those things out so you can say like, oh, we actually can't make that scene change. Who can do that? Or, you know, oh, that music cue is actually a little long. Maybe we can cut that a little bit.
Since I've only really been an actor, I don't think I've really truly realized how much work goes on behind the scenes, all these technicians are doing, and I think I've gained an appreciation for it now.
When Tech Week comes, the actors are primarily doing the same thing. They're just running through what they've spent weeks rehearsing at, and so they should have that down. So Tech Week is then we'll bring in lighting and designers, so there's a lot of start and stopping.
Sometimes they're seeing it for the first time, so they're changing the lighting as you're up there, or changing the sound design to fit different tempos or loudness. It's an interesting experience because everything's changing as you're doing it. It's more about the tech people than the actors. Of course, it's a good experience for the actors to run through it again, but it's a lot of, do a line, stop, do the same line with this lighting, stop, do the same line with this orchestral backing a little louder or a little softer. So it's a lot more stop and go, which can lead to, long nights, but a lot easier nights in my opinion.
It's a lot of stop and go for the actors, but it really helps the backstage crew and stage managers learn where those cues line up and to work with lighting and sound.
It can be a lot. It's usually very slow and very intentional, and ideally you don't want to rush it because that's where kind of all the magic is built so that it can happen for shows.
We're finalizing props. It's the first time we try on costumes.
Which makes a big difference on stage. Different shoes can affect how you're walking, different clothes can affect your mobility on stage. Like when I was in Sleepy Hollow, I basically wore a metal suit kind of underneath my clothing that was kind of a rig for being headless. So it changed a lot of how my blocking went when I'm wearing kind of a metal cage. I can't do rolls and flips as well as I would have, so I kind of had to change roles with different people, and it kind of affects how you block a lot of the times.
From a costuming perspective, Tech Week is usually making sure the garment is actually finished. Emily likes to make a very large distinction between wearable and finished. One of the biggest memes almost that come out of the costume shop is the phrase, "done is beautiful," just because we're always scrambling, and as long as the garment is finished, then it's good to go.
People have different philosophies over Tech Week. I like to be a little more stressed before Tech Week, and then kind of try to take it as easy as possible during Tech Week. Some people look at that very differently. There's a lot of other designers that I worked with that they want the sort of experience of being in the space with the design ensemble, with the actors, with the director, with everything, and kind of just have your building blocks and build it during Tech with everything. And you can see the, potential creative advantage of that. I have a difficulty operating under those circumstances. I like to come in day one being as ready as possible and then make smaller adjustments. It doesn't always work, but that's just how I feel most comfortable.
I'm used to having, maybe a couple days of cue to cue, building looks and working with the director as the actors move around, the set pieces move. You build the looks kind of as you're seeing it very slowly, right? And be ready. The other thing is you don't want to wait until Tech Week to realize, oh, I didn't know you needed a zone in the back on the bridge. I could do that tonight at midnight when I go up in the lift, and I can make that zone happen, and then I can, patch it. That's too late. You don't want to wait to build something like that until Tech Week.
Tech Week survival is lots of coffee. Drink a lot of coffee. Bring people coffee on first Tech. Bringing people coffee wins you a lot of favors during Tech Week because everyone hates each other and we're all cranky. So if you're the one who brings coffee, people are less cranky at you. Pro tip.
Tech Week is crazy, especially this Tech Week, just because there are so many technical elements to this show. There's projection, there's sound. 90% of the show is underscored with music and lots of really cool lighting effects too. So Tech Week was very tech heavy for this show.
And so this past week, we've been trying to put all of that together with what we've been working on. And so for us, we were coming in saying, okay, we have this dance we made. Does it go with the music? And so I think that's been a really unique process this past week. Been a few late nights in there just because, of the nature of the show. There's so much going on. with the tech in the show, which is what makes it so powerful, I think, too, when all of that comes together.
Full runs, and that's kind of where everything kind of knits together in these kind of bigger productions. That's where all the elements kind of align and you kind of feel like you're ready to put on a show.
As of Thursday, I did the last tweaking and programming, and then I just cleaned my hands, and it's like, okay, now the show can run. Last night was opening night.
That's about all I have to say about Tech Week.
Throughout this process, the box office has been advertising the upcoming production, booking tickets, and encouraging people to come see the show.
We're ordering posters, we're getting that promotional imagery out there. I've spent a lot of the week driving around town, putting posters in coffee shops and restaurants and places that people might be visiting and might say, hey, this sounds fun. You know, where do I find out more? And it has the website, it has our phone number. The recent weeks have definitely been just compiling that imagery, compiling those materials to send out, to put online, make people aware of the show.
What we were planning to do is just kind of do a social media blitz for this entire week leading up to the show. What I did is I came in, when they were rehearsing the dance, I took a couple videos so that they could see, oh, this is how this is going, this is how it's developing, this looks really fun.
So we opened the box office for the Snow Queen. People can reserve online. We have a lot of elderly patrons who prefer to just call or talk to someone in person. So after the box office opens, it's a lot of fielding calls, answering questions, helping people reserve tickets for them. We want people to come see our shows, so I definitely take a lot of phone calls and reserve tickets for people and help them pick their seats, seeing where the ticket sales are at and being like, okay, what can we do to boost them, to get more people to come? How can we draw more people in? We're gonna start promoting our family day now to get more of that on our Sunday matinee crowd, get some more young kids in there. We're gonna do another post with some candid shots of rehearsal to get people excited about what they're gonna see if they come to the show.
Recently, I've kind of been finishing up the snowflakes that the kids are going to be able to print out, make, and kind of bring with them to the performance on Sunday.
Come showtime, I have a team of ushers who help me out. They sell concessions and they help me seat people, and they're good student workers, pretty professional crew, which is fun.
Our job is to maintain a professional composure while also being polite and courteous to our audience members and ensuring that they are able to have a good time for the show. As the house manager, I tend to take the most difficult position of the ushering. I tend to be at the main door when I am assisting people to their seats, which tends to be the busiest.
Yeah, it's a pretty well-oiled machine at this point, which is nice.
Months of planning, practice, and creativity have led to this moment. And now, it's opening night.
Whenever I think of opening night, I get this pit in my stomach. I get so nervous just throughout the day, and then finally, when it's here, it's like, okay, the adrenaline has hit, it's showtime, it's gonna be amazing.
Opening night is always a thrill, just because you're so stressed and you're like the tightest stress ball you could ever be during Tech Week, and then opening night is kind of when all of that releases. You did everything that you could, you finished everything you could finish by Tech, and opening night is the point of no return, so you might as well just make the best of it.
Suddenly there's just so much purpose, because all during rehearsals, it's just an act that you're trying to get down habitually. And then suddenly you have to bring that to life when the audience is there. And I don't think that's ever been a negative experience. It's always like, okay, finally, I can show someone what we've spent months working on.
I woke up a little nervous this morning, definitely a little bit anxious, because you're just thinking, oh my goodness, it's the first time we're really doing this, and people are paying to come see us do this, which is super exciting. But I think now I'm not even nervous, it's just excitement, because we're so ready to have people here watching our show and experiencing it with us, because we worked really hard and I think we've created a masterpiece. So that's extremely exciting to have a full house tonight.
Opening night is really the telltale truth of did you succeed?
As a director, opening night is very fun to kind of see what those reactions are actually going to be like. And surprises abound. Some things that you think are going to be hilarious get no laughs. Some things that are, you don't even think about get the biggest laughs. But there's always many moments that what you planned and what the audience perception is are on the same page. And that's kind of why we do it, I think, is when you can really craft a moment or you know, something, or try to craft a moment that people are really gonna get and get excited about, or even just like, you know, quietly connect with.
If you're directing a comedy, you have to imagine you're doing all this funny stuff, but nobody's laughing up until opening night. You think it's funny, but you start to doubt. And I've been doing this for nearly 30 years, and you still wonder, are people gonna laugh at this? Is this gonna be any good? And then the audience comes. And then they either laugh or they don't. And now all of a sudden you know, oh, this is funny. Yeah, the stuff we thought was funny is funny.
That was awesome to have people reacting to our jokes and laughing, because our directors think we're funny. But now other people coming in have to also think we're funny. And we have real character. And I watched part of the show myself too last night, just like that ending scene off stage. And I get emotional too, honestly. It's really powerful.
Opening night is always kind of the test audience. Like, how are things reading? How did this read? All questions are answered on opening night.
You kind of hold your breath a little bit because you don't know, depending on the show, like, okay, how our audience is going to react? What is the audience going to be like? Because so much of between actors and audience, it affects how the show will be. And so you're kind of hesitant and waiting until that first scene is done, and then you're like, okay, we got this, we're good, we're rolling, the ball is rolling, we can't stop now, like the show has to keep going or nothing. So it's kind of, you hold your breath for a little bit, but then kind of after that first scene, it's like, okay, we're going, let's do this. And it's really fun.
I have a really dramatic entrance in this show. When I first walk out on the stage, 'cause that's when all of my townspeople are surrounding me as a summer princess. And I think it's kind of that first moment of, oh, I'm doing this. This is actually happening. And then it kind of sinks in and you just kind of become the character, and it just feels really natural. So I always get that first moment of, when the lights hit me, but then you aren't yourself anymore. You kind of become another person. And so I think that's just, it's kind of the magic of theater, is what it is.
Opening night is also sometimes when unexpected things happen. One of the gals they were practicing a move for the opening number for Sleepy Hollow, where they do a spin on the ground and then stand up. One of the gals had caught her foot on her really heavy wool skirt and stepped on the hem and stood up and tore her skirt from her waistband like 10 minutes before we opened or something like that for the performance. So I had to grab it, run downstairs and like stitch that thing together as much as it possibly can. And the skirt, putting it together initially, had broken like 3 different needles. So I was stressed out of my mind, but the repair got done. I threw it at her and she put it on, then went out, and the rest of the show went absolutely fine.
But opening night is always the most nerve-wracking, for me at least. And then as we go throughout the weekend, it's a little less and less scary because we know we can do it now for a live audience. But that adrenaline hits every single night, and it's great. It keeps us on our toes.
I feel like the moment the show opens, as a director or a designer, it's not mine anymore. The leadership of it belongs to other people, belongs to the stage managers, belongs to the actors, all this stuff. It is theirs now. And also, it is meant for the audience now. It's no longer for me. I have too much, for lack of a more positive word, baggage with the show, and I don't mean that negatively. I just, I've been thinking about it for a year and doing all these things. And so I personally can't come into it with just kind of that like new experience with an audience. But I'm more than happy to hand it off and being like, okay, this is yours now. Let me know what you think. It belongs to you now, and it just like exists otherwise, and I'm just kind of a fly on the wall at that situation. I really like that personally. Just kind of that little bit of separation, or that little bit of change in perspective where, like, I did my job as best I can, take it.
Basically, the director sort of tips their hat to the stage manager, because now the stage manager typically is sort of running the show. As a director, and since I'm working in education, I'm still coming to every show that I direct, and I like to run warm-ups with my actors. I'm just in love with watching shows from the wings. So a lot of times I'm just the quiet little mouse who's sort of hanging out backstage while the actors are doing their magic.
Yeah, as a director, it's just sort of like doing your best to make something, giving it to the world, and seeing what happens.
Seeing something that I've written come to life on stage is incredible. I never actually thought it would happen. When I was little, I would write little plays and I would write little stories and I would make my sisters act them out and I would make them weird costumes and I'd make them. And when I was little, I said, I want to write plays someday. I want to write stuff that people will perform someday. And then I got into high school and I got even more serious about it. I was like, I think I want to do that still. I think that'd be cool. And I wrote little plays with my high school friends and we put them on and that was cool too. But I always kind of knew I wanted to make something for the Bethany stage because I always loved Bethany productions. And I didn't think it would happen for real. I took the playwriting class and I learned a lot there and I was like, I definitely have incredible tools here and I think I'm a little bit closer, but I think in the back of my mind always doubted that I'd actually have a full-scale production going. Seeing it come to life is unreal. Even in the moments that are difficult, that are frustrating, that are confusing, it still comes back to like, okay, but we made this. And that's what Emily and I keep saying. It's like, okay, it'll happen. And it's gotta happen. And it's going to happen. And that's what's incredible about it.
The number of times a play is performed will vary. It could run for months, or it could run for a single weekend. Here at the Bethany Theater, plays are performed over 2 weekends. When the performances are finished, it's time to strike the set.
Right now, this is opening night. The first show is in a couple hours, and I'm really excited. I'm also looking ahead to set strike, which is a little over a week away. We finish the set a few days before a production begins, and pretty much a week and a few days later, we are taking down the set.
Ooh, this is gonna be a doozy to strike. There's a lot of elements to this set. Lots of fabric, lots of PVC, but it's been a while since we've had a full set. So I think it's gonna take a little bit of an adjustment for everybody taking down this set, but it'll be great.
Set strike is sad. It's when you see this whole month, a little over the month of work just get torn to shreds. It's so sad, but it's so much relief at the same time just to be done with it, to be like, oh, whew, we did it.
Always when a show opens, my brain is kind of like already flirting with the next project, whatever's coming down the road, and set strike is a very kind of definitive statement of that, where you're sort of like, you had this experience, whatever happened, hopefully it was extremely positive, and then it opens up the space for what you're gonna do next, and I think that's kind of cool and exciting.
At the end of the process, you gotta strike the set. You gotta strike the lights, you gotta strike costumes, everything that was out for the show now has to go back and be put away or get thrown out. And we get on the phone the week before and we order a big fat dumpster because there's just a lot of stuff that we can't use anymore. And I've got a fireplace at my house, and whatever scrap wood, if a wood piece is this long, I'll take it home and we'll burn it. But you wanna make sure you've got a dumpster because you're throwing a number of things away.
If it's too small, not worth keeping, something that we would only ever use once, it gets tossed. If it's something we think we might use again, we put it into storage. And we have a lot of prop storage and set piece storage, and hopefully we'll use all of that again at some point. And if you put enough time and effort into something and make it something you might want to use again, we hold on to it.
And it's all hands on deck. All cast members are expected to be there, all crew members are expected to be there. This is sort of an honorable thing for the actors to do because this is the actors' way, their final way to tip their hats to all the technicians who made them look good. It's not fair to have just technicians strike the set, in my opinion. The actors need to be there to strike the set because they're thanking the technicians who made them look good. Everybody is there, and you want them to all be there because usually you want to have the cast party afterwards, you know? And then you've got your different foremen who are telling people what to do. Costumer says, okay, hats all go in this bin. Please put all the dresses over here, skirts go over here. We're gonna be taking those things to the cleaners tomorrow. Shop foreman says, first of all, we have to take down the trees because once we take down the trees, then that'll free up the platforms and we're gonna take the platforms apart. Don't take the platforms actually apart, only take them apart from one another, because we're going to keep these platforms, these weird shaped platforms we're not using, we're going to get rid of those so that it doesn't matter. You have somebody who's basically telling instructions to everybody else.
A lot of times I've helped with props, so just kind of gathering those up and making sure they go back into their storage or wherever we pulled them from. Or I've also helped with costumes a lot, where we gather up all the costumes, we take them to laundry, organize them, sort them out and whatnot. But then also, yeah, the set has to come down depending how big it is. Sometimes it's a really easy strike, sometimes it takes a little bit longer. But yeah, everyone kind of works into groups, and if your group's done, you find another group and kind of tag team along until it's all done, and then we eat pizza.
For all the work that it took you to put a fabulous set up, how it all comes down in 4 or 5 hours. and then you're left with just a blank slate again.
It is sad just to see all the work, all the hours that went into that. Like, I don't know how many hours, but a lot of hours, and you take it down within like four hours or so.
You're putting things up to do something cool, and then you're taking it down and you're starting it all over again. Strike is kind of bittersweet. You worked really hard. You've tried to create this cool environment for an audience. You're trying to tell an awesome story. Once story time is done, strike is closing the book.
Because you work so hard to put the show together, so then to come back as a group and kind of relish in the fact that you finished that is just really incredible to celebrate that with everyone.
The cast party is also a big part of strike. We want everybody to get together and then have a party, and then that's closure. We all did this cool thing. We made this cool thing happen together. Everybody had their really cool, inclusive part on this project. We all thank one another, and then we go on to the next thing. And so it's closure. So it's part of it. You need it. You got to have it. Closure is a huge part of the theatrical process.
Now you've met some of the hundreds of people who put in thousands of hours of work to make a theater production possible. So next time you see a play, you'll know a little more about what went on behind the scenes.